Well, we had the national crime statistics 10 days ago. We had the Gauteng crime statistics today. Just last week, a new urban crime report released by the SA Cities Network. Siphelele Ngobese is a researcher for inclusive cities at the South African Cities Network. Siphelele, good afternoon to you. We've seen today a huge increase in the number of murders in Gauteng. The number of sexual assaults and rapes is up as well. What kind of trends have you been picking up in your research?
Thanks for having me, Stephen, and good afternoon to you. I think our observations are quite consistent with what we've just heard from Gauteng Commissioner of Police, Mawela. Definitely an upward trajectory in the more violent forms of crime in particular, and of particular concern. As you've mentioned, we released a report that speaks to the cities of South Africa, is that the trajectory of cities holding the bulk in terms of percentages for certain crime types, particularly the violent crime types, continues, and that's not to mention also the fact that we report such grim and concerning numbers in an anomaly period and in an anomaly year where COVID-19 kind of showed us some changes. However, some of the more violent forms of crime persisted, and we saw that particularly with regards to gender-based violence and femicide, there was an upward spike. Similarly, attacks and the murders of children also went up. So quite consistent with what we are seeing coming out of Gauteng today.
There are lots of different ways to look at numbers. I've been speaking to crime experts for the last few years. They said that even before the pandemic, it seemed the number of violent crimes was going up. It seems, though, some of the research I've seen today suggests it was going down until the pandemic. How do you read that?
Well, so as you say, it's not straightforward, it's quite tricky, and there are different readings. So maybe let me just focus on sexual offenses for a second, just as an illustrator. What we saw in our year of reporting, which is 2020 and 2021, is that there was a bit of a downturn when it came to sexual offenses. However, I think to your point about how you read it is quite subjective. For us, it didn't necessarily speak to a downward turn in the incidence of this form of crime. However, it might have to do with rates of reporting of such a crime, and so which leaves us kind of concerned as to what could be happening with regards to reporting, the reporting environment, how enabling it is for victims of this form of crime. And so what we say is that although you, in terms of your objective evidence, you're seeing a downturn, you shouldn't necessarily read that as that form of crime having been resolved or us moving towards a better place with regards to sexual offenses. As you know, GBV remains rife, and sexual offenses in some cases, some forms of sexual offense do have an impact upon and do arise out of the broader pandemic, which our president calls the second pandemic, which is gender-based violence and femicide.
Gauteng has more people than any other province. Is that reflected in the resources, the police resources that it gets to fight crime?
Again, something quite subjective. In some quarters, it might be argued that certain places and places that are in dire need of policing are severely under-policed, particularly where the more vulnerable in our societies are. So the places that we might call previously disadvantaged places, but presently disadvantaged places, informal settlements, where women are, where people with disabilities are, and depending on where you are in South Africa, you could be exposed to an entirely different profile and exposure to crime and violence. And that is something that requires more visible policing, more closer policing. However, side by side with policing, we advance the notion that you need an all of government and an all of society approach to some of the things that may need a longer term approach and a view that is not just policing based. So really pushing for there to be closer relationships and a narrowing down of silos in how we all work in our different areas and in our different functions. And if I might give you an example, Stephen, what eThekwini municipality is doing in partnership with the South African Police Service, with the city's Department of Health, to have a holistic approach to the homelessness problem that has been present in the city, but that spiked during COVID-19 as well. Just one example of the types of partnership approaches that are needed to also address some of the more long-term drivers of crime and violence.
Siphelele and Ngobese, thank you from the South African Cities Network. I really do appreciate the time.